August 25th, 2001. If we can begin by roll call.
Charles Blacklands,
Here.
Kevin Boyles,
Here.
Tom Hageland,
Here.
Ruth Nelson, Bob Nystrom, and Jana Shogren. Here. 4 of the 6 are present at the moment.
Thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to do a quick recognition. Lane?
Yeah, thank you very much. This one is really a fun one for me today to talk about the recognitions regarding our building projects. As you know, we've been putting in, thanks to our generous community, we've been putting in millions of dollars worth of work just this summer. And at Riverside Elementary School, Lowell, Garfield, and also at the high school. We just are really proud of the contractors that have been working in incredible situations right now and really actually having some tough time getting some of the equipment that they need for all of our buildings. And yet, all of the contractors have been giving their heart and soul, and our projects are on time. I've been talking with many of the ICS representatives on different projects throughout the state. And many of the schools are starting school late because their building projects are so far behind or they aren't getting equipment. And we can really attest to all of the contractors who are working diligently. I just want to remind everyone, it's fun to have such a large amount of people here today, that approximately 70% of all of the contractors that we have working on our projects are within a 60-mile radius of Brainerd. And so you can just see that local commitment that people are making to ensure that that these projects are done, that they're on time, and that they're going to be beautiful learning facilities for all of our learners at Brainerd Public Schools. And so I want to take a little bit of time just to acknowledge all of the people that have worked so hard just this summer on those 4 projects. And so thank you to High Tech Construction, Verrado Brothers, Thielen Roofing and Heating. You're going to hear a lot of locals here. Peterson Sheet Metal, RJ Mechanical, LJ Plumbing and Heating, Summit Fire Protection, Holden Electric, Allstate Communications, LVC Companies, Summit Fire, Anderson Brothers, DeChantel Excavating, Rice Lake Contracting, TNT Construction, Wells Concrete, Green Valley Roofing, Northland Glass and Glazing, Gull Lake Glass, RTL Construction, St. Cloud Acoustics, Dow Acoustics, Wisconsin Terrazzo and Tile, Grazzini Brothers, Multiple Concept Interiors, Floors by Becker, Hutterlick Carpets, H2I, Dynamic Sports Construction, Franzen Decorating, Steinbrecher Painting, Cullinex, and finally, Northwest Playgrounds. And all of these companies have loyal and dedicated employees that have worked tirelessly to see to it that our buildings are ready to go on time for school this fall. So can we just take a minute to give these people a round of applause? I know some of our representatives from ICS are here, and they're going to talk to us in just a little bit over this abatement hearing. But there's been great guidance and leadership with them and throughout the district and our administrative team and staff, everybody working together to make this a reality. And so we are really proud of this. And one of these days, this is going to get better, and we can do these open houses and these grand openings the way we so deserve, the way we got to do with the Gitchezebia last May, and we hope to do that with all of our buildings here very shortly. So thank you again, and that's it for my recognitions today.
All right, thank you, Elaine. Next up, this meeting of the school board is being conducted in accordance with Minnesota Statutes 13D.02. Meetings conducted by interactive TV conditions. Persons may monitor this meeting from a remote location by watching on YouTube Live. This meeting is being recorded. Access to the recording will be made available on the school district's website as soon as reasonably possible. The maximum seating capacity for the public seating section with 3 feet of social distance being observed in the school board meeting room is calculated at 23. This number of seats will be maintained. Meeting room number 200 will be set up for extra seating and viewing of the board meeting. Face coverings are highly recommended for all unvaccinated individuals. Okay, next up we have approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Director Nystrom and a second by Director Hagelin. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, any discussion? No discussion? All those in favor? Please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. All right, agenda is approved. All right, next up, we have the, the public hearing for proposed
Need to know if Bob arrived or no.
property tax abatement. The property tax abatement and the, during this public hearing, some of you may be planning to address an issue regarding abatement during the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. We welcome your comments. Please be reminded that we must comply with board policy number 206. And the following limitations will apply during tonight's public comment period. The school board will enforce a 3-minute limit on each person and will only address the proposed property tax abatement, please. During the public comment session, complaints or allegations against students or employees may not be discussed due to data privacy. Complaints or allegations must be submitted in writing to Superintendent Larson. Finally, please be advised there is no verbal interaction or question and answer with the Board of Education or Superintendent during this time. I'll do my best during that time to give a 30-second warning during 3 minutes. But Marcy, please take it away.
And I just want to take the time, you guys all know Damien, so I don't feel like I have to introduce him. Sorry, Damien, from ICS. And then we also have Matthew Hammer here from Ellers, you know, the finance gurus. I wish I could take the credit, but they really do take the credit for this Blueprint 181 plan. So we're just going to go through the presentation, and then at the end, there'll be time for some public comment.
Welcome, Matthew.
I'll add as I can.
Okay, well, thank you, Marcy. I finally won the arm wrestling match with Greg Crow to come to the meeting tonight. But we're going to briefly do, as part of Minnesota statute section 469, with the abatement process, we're required to have a hearing. And tonight we're just going to briefly, quickly go through a presentation that we've prepared as part of that process. So we'll quickly run through it, and then we'll have time for public comment at the end here. As I said, the abatement process it falls under Minnesota Section 469, and for school districts, even though this has been a statute that's been in place since 1997, school districts have been utilizing it for about 10 years now, and they only have the authority through the Department of Education to use abatement bonds for parking lots and parking lot structures, and we're looking to fund projects district-wide as part of the overall plan that was discussed with the voters back in 2018. And this today we've issued about $5 million back as part of the 2019 bond, and we're looking at issuing the remaining authority to fund about $1 million worth of projects for the parking lots.
And Damien did put together an attachment that's in the board packet that breaks out what the $1,550,000 is a part of.
Yeah, so they're gonna fund projects at South Campus and in the middle school.
Damien, do you want to talk about what they are? Just hit the high points.
Sure. Yes, at the middle school, we're going to do a mill and overlay of the parking lot at Forest View Middle School, and also do a bunch of well-needed sidewalk repairs. And then at South Campus, it's to establish the parking lot and then the sidewalks for that facility.
Will it be the front parking lot at Forest View Middle School?
Yes.
That you'll be looking at? Good,
Yep.
because some people asked about that the other day, so if we were doing that, so.
Yeah.
Good.
Any questions?
So there's a pretty extensive process as part of the abatement process. Tonight, we're at the stage of the hearing. Even though, like other municipalities, when you're identifying parcels as part of the abatement process, taxes are spread differently. But with school districts, everybody's going to pay taxes in the same manner they've always paid taxes. There's no change for any taxpayer as part of the process. The levy is going to start with taxes payable 22, and we're looking at a 3-year term for the bonds. Today we're having the hearing this afternoon. We're looking to award sale of the bonds in November, and then the construction period is going to fall over a couple summers in 21 and 22. Like I said, we're looking at a 3-year term on the bond issue. The interest rate we're looking at as part of the issuance is estimated at a little bit over 0.8%, so 0.8%. We're looking at an annual payment of around $370 annually for that 3-year period. And these bonds will qualify for the Ag to School credit, which is an important piece for ag property owners in the district. Just to highlight kind of where we're at in the overall plan, we're still within the thresholds that were outlined as part of the election back in 2018, and those little yellow bars that make up those 3 years, starting with taxes payable 22, are what we're looking at for the abatement bond payments, which you can still see are slightly under the tax rate that was established as part of the election back in 2018.
Can I address that?
Yep.
That would be the $7 that we had talked about during the bond referendum, the $3 on the elementary projects, 3 on the secondary, and 1 for the Gitche-Ziba Center for the Arts. And so when you add the tax abatement piece there, it still remains underneath that $7 per month that we had promised the voters when we sold the referendum and when the voters voted to approve the bond projects. So
Thank you for adding that, because I did get that question before the meeting. So I just want to make sure we clarify that.
great.
So any further questions on that component? So with that, that concludes the brief public hearing presentation, and if there's no other comments, we can open it up for public comment.
Great.
I don't believe we have any public comment. We have no comments regarding tax abatement.
All right, no comments regarding tax abatement, so we will move on to the next step. Approval of resolution granting property tax abatement as presented at the hearing.
I'll move that we approve the resolution as presented.
Second. All right, we have a motion to approve by Director Boyles, and then we have a second by Director Shulgren. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call vote. Thank you for that.
Director Boyles,
Aye.
Director Haglund,
Aye.
Director Nystrom,
Aye.
Director Shulgren,
Aye.
and Director Black Lance.
Aye.
All in favor.
Motion approved. All right, next up, approval of intent resolution concerning the issuance of general obligation abatement bonds and refunding bonds series 2021A.
So in your packet is the pre-sale report, which Matthew's going to go through for you guys.
And I'll just quickly touch on the high points. So we're looking at combining the issuance of the abatement bonds with this current refunding of your 2013 B bonds to be more efficient in the bond sale process, mostly to save on costs of issuance, and then also provide some little additional savings as part of that refunding that we're looking on the final little over $2 million maturity that's outstanding on the 2013 B refunding bonds. So what that means is we're looking at about a little over $43,000 in debt service savings on those previously issued bonds in that 1 year for fiscal year 24. And like we talked about in the abatement hearing, we're looking at awarding these bonds in the middle of November. And at that point in time, we'll have the final results when we take bids for both these purposes. So with that, I can answer any questions in regards to the pre-sale report or the resolution that you guys have in front of you tonight.
I thought the interest rates were great.
Yeah, they are great, aren't they?
Unbelievable,
Yeah.
under 1%.
Yeah, a little over, we're estimating about 0.7% on this issue.
Awesome.
That's great. All right, any other questions?
So Chair Black Lance, we do have a public comment delayed with the relay up and down, so.
Oh, okay, so why not, before we make motion, why don't we move along, step aside, I should say, and accept public comment?
Perfect.
But I think they can clear, we don't have any questions for you. Any further questions?
Yeah, Doug Kern. Anyway, the question I have is, listening downstairs is kind of hard to hear because it's echoey. As far as, it would be nice to clarify, the taxes in 2022 are not going to go up because of the abatement. They went through so fast, it's kind of like just trying to understand. In 2018, they mentioned 2018, I supported all three questions that they had because I believe in protecting our children. So that's the biggest reason, and supporting the community, that with the, I can't pronounce the name of it, but the big place over there. But the question that I have is the taxes are not going to go up. And so it looks like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I'm not quite sure. I think that's kind of what we're doing.
Would that be?
So yeah, if they could answer the question, just about the taxes going up and the 2018, because my brain doesn't work that fast when they're talking. So
Right, well, thank you for that. My understanding of the public comment, we're not able to have a back and forth.
We should answer that. That's a good question.
Bob, but if during the discussion, we could maybe ask that question.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
continue.
Yeah, so I think the chart that we had as part of the public hearing, I don't know if we can get it back up, that had those little yellow bars on it. So taxes payable 21 is that bar that's a little bit above where we're looking at projected for 22. So those three yellow bars for the abatement bonds represent the taxes, anticipated taxes for the payments that we're anticipating when we receive bids in November. And you can see that that's actually a slight tick down and not a tax increase over taxes payable 22. So that is within the range of where we were anticipating taxes to be for 22 and slightly below.
So just to ask a question then, does that mean that it will not go above $7?
That's correct.
And I just want to clarify, we can't promise taxes will not go up because if your market value changes or there's other factors than just what we put on the levy. So just be clear that when you get your statement, if your taxes did go up, there are other factors that contribute to that other than just the school.
Very clear. All right, anything else you all would like to share on the matter?
I'll move to approve the resolution as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion to approve from Director Hagelin and a second from Director Nystrom. Although, any discussion?
It's a roll call.
And a roll call, thank you. No discussion, we'll have a roll call.
Tom Hagelin,
Yes.
Bob Nystrom,
Yes.
Jana Shogren,
Yes.
Charles Black Lance,
Yes.
Kevin Boils,
Yes.
all in favor?
All right, thank you. Motion approved.
Thank you all.
Okay, next up thank you all very much, appreciate it. Next up, we have the special school board meeting. And with that, we move on to the special school board meeting. With that, let's have the approval of the minutes in the special school board meeting from August 16th, 2021.
So moved.
A second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, those in favor of approving the school board meeting minutes for August 16th, signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. All right. Okay, minutes are approved. Next up, we have the regular school board meeting on August 9th. Those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Director Hagelin to approve the minutes and a second by Director Nystrom. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion approved. All right. Next up, consent calendar.
I'll move we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve the consent calendar by Director Shulgren and a second by Director Nystrom. All those in favor? Oh, any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion approved. All right, now we're going to move on to the next business, or new business. And those will be presentations from COVID-19 Back to School Informational Update.
I just want to introduce this today. I want to thank Angie Bennett. Thanks to Heidi Hahn for being here to also do our presentation today. As we said at the last regular meeting of the Board of Education, we were going to give regular updates on where the status of COVID-19 is within our school and community and how that could impact our school district moving forward for the school year of 2021-22. And so the three of us are going to tag team this a little bit. We all have different roles in it that we want to go over regarding this coming school year. I want to remind everyone, as we did last year, you're going to see a lot of similarities because this, having been dealing with COVID-19 for the past 18 months, we found last year that if we began our presentations knowing exactly what our goals were, that we always knew where to focus our attention. And so I just want to reiterate once again, what are the major goals that we have for the coming school year? First of all, we want to prioritize the safety and the well-being of our students and our staff. Secondly, one of the things that we learned loud and clear from last year when we were addressing COVID-19 is that there is nothing more important than that direct instruction between teachers and their students 5 days a week, full days each year. And so those are two of the priorities that we definitely have this year, to try to keep everyone safe and to have our kids with their teachers, with their peers, being able to learn in the best way possible. We know we did the best job we could last year with the distance learning, with the hybrid learning and the in-person learning, but we know that we did the best job when our kids were in person. And so we're prioritizing that. Also, we're going to align our recommendations to the Board of Education, and the local school board will be making the decisions this year based on the data that we get to them from the Center of Disease Control, the Minnesota Department of Health, Crow Wing County Public Health, Minnesota Department of Education, and more. And this is going to be part of the presentation in a little bit, but you're going to see that things are very different this year because we do not have a safe learning plan that, like we had last year, that MDE had given us as a guide. And so all of the authority and decision-making now has to come back to each individual school district separately and the Board of Education to ultimately make the decision. And so we will be talking about making sure that we have the data, the science-based data. Number 4, we're also going to develop, we felt that it was necessary that we developed a COVID-19 response plan and decision-making matrix for helping to guide the decisions that we're making in our school district and to help guide, to give information to the Board of Education so that you can make the best decision that we can for the school district. This is not a requirement, but this is something that we felt that was very important as far as giving people the communication that they need to say why we're choosing or why we're recommending a certain decision at a certain time based on the information from this matrix. And we'll be going through that as we go through this process. And finally, once again, we want to make sure that we have timely and clear communication for our public and to make sure that we have it on our website and that we're providing these frequent presentations at the Board of Education along with the other communication pieces that we firmly believe in. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heidi Hahn, and she's going to bring you through some of the guidance that we have as far as data right now.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chair Black-Lance and members of the board. At our last regular school board meeting on August 9th, you tasked us with several duties. One was to review all the current guidance we've been able to receive regarding public schools in responses to COVID-19. You also tasked district administrators, like Superintendent Larson was speaking, to develop some type of matrix or guidelines or thresholds to look at when making decisions regarding additional mitigation strategies that may need to be implemented or when we need to make a shift to an online learning model. So I'll start again, and this is some things you've seen from our last board meeting, but this is the guidance we've been receiving from the Centers for Disease Control. The number 1 priority is in-person instruction for our school year. The next priority that I've outlined is vaccination for those who are eligible to be vaccinated. The CDC has recommended that masks should be worn indoors by all individuals regardless of vaccination status. They've also recommended maintaining 3 feet of social distancing between students when in classrooms, combined with masking for those individuals not fully vaccinated to reduce transmission risk. And as always, students, teachers, staff should stay home when they're showing any signs or symptoms of an infectious illness. The Minnesota Department of Health, like Superintendent Larson referenced, we no longer have the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan, which is what we're using our guidance from last year. That expired on July 1st of 2021. And so the Minnesota Department of Health, much like many of the departments of health across the country, are aligning their strategies with the Center for Disease Control. The Minnesota Department of Health has provided further guidance from the Centers for Disease Control. They're again encouraging and recommending vaccinations for eligible populations. They're encouraging us to pay strict attention to all mitigation factors that we can put in place and to layer as many of those mitigation factors as possible. They're aligning to federal guidance, which is that mandate for face coverings on school buses, which that's in effect through January 18 of 2022. That is a federal mandate. Again, they're aligning with that social distancing. And one of the clarifications that has come when we looked at last year what we were doing, if you remember, if a student tested positive within, let's say, an elementary classroom, that whole classroom was quarantined. When we had to do contact tracing and quarantining, in whether it was on transportation or at the middle or high school level, we really looked at that distance around. A lot of parents would refer to it almost as a bullseye. So we'd take all those students around and they would be put in quarantine. The difference in guidance that's come for public schools is that at close contact, if students are wearing indoors, if they're wearing appropriate fitting mask, they're no longer considered a close contact. And that aligns with that we were seeing when we were quarantining classrooms. We were not seeing multiple positive cases coming out of those classrooms. So that's for the clarification that's come from the Department of Health. One of the other questions that you asked us was, what are other information sources that we're getting or considering or reading about, sitting through webinars regarding face coverings? We've done that with the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Family Physicians, Minnesota Department of Health, Crow Wing County Public Health. We've been in regular communication with Michelle Moritz, who's the public health supervisor for Crow Wing County, and with Mayo Clinic down in Rochester, Minnesota. The Mayo Clinic has released data that's saying right now 21% of all positive COVID cases across the country are currently found in children. So when we talk about those multiple layers of mitigation, so we know that we're going to have students and staff that come into the building infectious. We've had many students and staff say they're asymptomatic. They don't even know until they're tested positive because they were considered a close contact. So when we developed our decision-making matrix and how we might move to online learning, we really had to keep in mind all these mitigation strategies. So what are the things that we can overlay and put in place? And when we show you our response plan and decision-making matrix, we'll do that. But we considered all these things because the more mitigation we have, the slower that transmission or the stop to transmission will occur. And these are things that people have heard over and over again when we talk about the cleaning and disinfecting protocols that remain in place. When we talk about staying home when we're sick, we're talking about the hand washing, HVAC systems and ventilation. Our school buses have been great when it's nice outside, all the windows have been down, right, to allow that fresh air to flow through. We followed contact tracing and quarantine guidelines last year. We have had masks in place last year. The vaccination status has become more eligible, and the change, the big one, is that 6 feet to 3 feet social distancing. There has been some new guidelines about screening and testing, and I'll address that later in the presentation. And again, this just reviews why we're having to do this. All authority regarding decisions have been given to local school districts and the boards of education and the Board of Education. And again, we were tasked. So I'm just gonna hyperlink this quick so you can see it, but we'll go in more detail with it. But we have developed a decision-making matrix. And one of those big pieces of the matrix, not a touch screen. So we've established an incident command team. This very much is similar to what we had in place last year. So we have Superintendent Larson, we have our communication support, we're working directly with our district nurses, we're working with Crow Wing County Public Health, we have an MDH contact for positive cases, and we're really looking at if we're gonna move into any type of testing options, having a coordinator and site support. Okay, so in developing that, we tried to look at and align our data with data that we've been familiar with. So we're all familiar with last year. This was the guidance that was part of the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan when we really had to look at learning model changes. And just for reference, when we did this, if you remember when we moved to distance learning for all, this was a guide, right? Because county numbers, we really tried to pay attention to what was happening in certain school buildings. We sometimes had resets or if there was an outbreak. But last fall, we didn't move to distance learning for all students until our numbers were well over 100. So again, it was a guide that was used through the Safe Learning Plan. We've tried to create things that would align with data that we can review. So one of the things that we proposed in our plan is really looking at what should be a guideline when we need to consider face coverings. So if you look here at this graph that we put in, the top, the color should look real familiar because it follows the county data. But we've asked for those 10,000 cases cases per 10,000 in the last 14 days. And when you look at that, it goes across from minimal to high. And so these are recommendations of when those things should start to be in place. So when we start to see substantial and high transmission, there's recommendations for additional face covering mitigations, from going from strongly recommending to requiring them. You'll see on the bottom of that slide, face coverings on transportation. Again, it's a federal mandate through January 18th of 2022. When you look at face covering requirements in athletics and activities, we've also developed guidelines around that. The guidelines for athletics and activities will mirror the guidelines that are put in place for the school. There is clarification in there when you're in active activity. So let's say you're competing, you're in gym class, things like that. If there's a mandate for face coverings, you would not be required to have your face covering on during those times. And those are spelled out in the athletic and activities guidelines. Data that will be reviewed by that incident command team that we reviewed with you. We'll be looking at that Crow Wing County 14-day case count. We'll be looking at incidences of illness by school building and across the district. So also included in that decision-making matrix and response plan, we have a whole chart that shows you what percentage of kids are at 1% in the building, 2% in the building, 3%, 4%, 5%. And we've established guidelines that when we start to see it hit that 3, that moderate, the team needs to be getting together again and saying what's happening specific within a classroom, what's happening specific within a building, and really looking at influenza-like incidences and positive cases of COVID-19. We'll also track student attendance and staff attendance, because we found last year when we started to see an uptick or an outbreak that was going to occur, attendance data was giving us a trigger to that information. So that information will be reviewed weekly, or when there's...
Would you go back to the plan and just kind of walk them through that just a little bit, the whole thing?
Sure.
I think that might be helpful to see what pieces are on there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So this is just stating the purpose of the document. So we'll have that incident command team that I've referenced. That's the data we'll be reviewing. Okay. Really looking at what were the guidance that was in the safe learning plan, and then trying to lay some of that strategy over to what could be guidance. So like we set up there, this matrix is kind of a decision-making matrix for face coverings that can be looked at based upon public health data that's coming in, trend data, and influenza-like cases that are occurring in each building. So when I say influenza-like illnesses, this is what we're talking about. So here's a district view of it. So in early childhood, when I see 24 to 25 students going out, that's kind of a high risk. So we want to get ahead of the high risk. So we kind of put that marker at 3%. So when we've talked about when public health intervenes with whooping cough, or when public health intervenes with a flu outbreak in a building, they're really looking at those attendance measures. So we try to outline that for our districts. We have a district level matrix to look at. And then if you go scroll further down, we also have a building level matrix to look at. So again, it's one of those early things that we can be looking at. If we start to see an uptick in population, our goal is at that 3%. That incident command team will be coming to talk about that. Is there something we should be looking at? Is there something we should be concerned about? And are there additional mitigation strategies we need to put in place? Any questions about that? Okay, the other piece that we're gonna do, we are gonna continue with our tracking and our responses to families. So as a student shows symptoms, or if a student tests positive, we tracked that all last year. We reached out to families. We made sure if they had any questions, we could connect them to the appropriate physician or resource help that they needed. And different this year is there's actually a COVID fact sheets that's been developed, much like the fact sheets when there's a case of lice that breaks out in the classroom, or a case of whooping cough like I've referenced. There's actually a fact sheet that can guide parents and give them information that they may need, and also give them contacts regarding that. So you might feel like I'm going to repeat myself a couple of times now after you've seen that document, so I apologize. But feel free to ask questions. So again, that's that matrix like we talked about, the cases per 10,000, really looking at how we would do that. So what's changed since our last board meeting? That was one of the questions you've asked, is for us to give you the most up-to-date data. So in speaking with Michelle Moritz yesterday, this is the data that she provided to us. So if you really look at since our last board meeting on August 9th to, this was yesterday's, actually the 21st data, there's been a 62.03% increase in cases. And again, the data that we got used to looking at last year, right? So there's 13 per 10,000 during that period in July. Then there was 17.7 the next period, and you can see it ticking upward. One of the questions we receive is this a compounding or rolling number, right? So is that 13 included in the 17.7? No, it is not. So it's a 2-week period. So during those 2 weeks, that's the positive case count per 10,000. Then that next 2-week period. So again, we really tried to look at data that we were familiar with and how we had responded to that data. So you can see current, it's not the asterisk, it's not quite done yet. So, because there's some testing delay and another day that would come into that data count.
Heidi, can I also jump in here that it was the last regular meeting of the Board of Education?
Yep.
It wasn't the special board meeting, but that's an error that we have on our documents.
Okay, so August 9th was
The
our
August
last regular
9th
school board meeting.
Yep.
Correct. Correct.
So this is just a slide that we've always kind of had included in the presentation. I presented something very similar. On August 9th, we haven't had a lot of increase since then, but we also have not had a lot of people in the building since then. Just this last week, we've been doing some training, so we might see some change as we move forward here. We did receive a couple more positives, or have now 5 positives, and 10 staff absences due to symptoms, or if they're being tested or had a positive case and were unvaccinated. Students, we've had 11 absences due to symptoms and awaiting test results, or household member positive with 4 positive cases. And this is the whole summer. So really since school went out to current.
One of the questions, or one of the phone calls I've been taking quite a seeking response to or about, is MDE released about a week ago some testing options for schools. One of the concerns parents had expressed was, does that mean you're going to test my child? So the answer to that question is no. But here's what they're recommending. They're recommending that students or individuals who are ineligible to be vaccinated, or those who think they might have symptoms, that they be tested. So currently, we have in place where our staff had on-site testing options last year, and we still have those tests available. So once a week, we had a testing site set up, staff could come in, they could take a test, and then they would get their results at a later time. What MDE and MDH are trying to do is make testing more readily available for families who would be interested in having a child tested or a staff member who would like to be tested. So we're really in the initial stages of exploring that. MDE is releasing an application that we'd have to do. We're exploring what would it look like if we would have a test available for every child. So if a parent had to come pick up their child, they could actually have a test that they could take home if they choose. Or we're exploring options about on-site testing, because we have some staff who will say, I think it's allergies. I normally have allergies. I don't really feel like I want to go home. Do I have a rapid test option? Because if it's allergies and not COVID, I'd prefer to stay at work. So we're really in the initial stages of exploring that. Again, we have the PCR vault tests, they're called, available for staff now, just like we did last year. Any other testing options for students or rapid testing options for staff? We're probably looking at end of September, first part of October, where those could be available as we work through the process with MDE and MDH. If a parent or student would choose that they would want their child tested, there's a whole consent form and process that they'd have to go through. There's also a process where if we do rapid testing, just so you know, we have to get a waiver because you basically are creating a lab site or a test site on school grounds, which is not something we typically would do. But in this case, there's options for us. So very early in the infancy, I know there's been a lot of questions and some concerns shared about that. So we'll continue to address those as those come, but that's our current status for testing.
So now that today I just kind of want to sum up again what we've talked about, because one of the, as you're all aware, the responsibility now is that the superintendent will make a recommendation to the board in which they can discuss the information and make a decision. And as I was planning and thinking about looking at the data, looking at the information that Heidi and Angie have presented just shortly, I just want to preface a few things that I think are really important. The first thing is I just really want to thank the public for getting involved and engaged in this process. For the last several board meetings, we've had a lot of people who have come. They've provided public input. We've received dozens and dozens of emails. We've received telephone calls. I know I get stopped in the middle of the street to talk a little bit about what's going on with COVID. People have asked me today, you know, have you told anybody what your recommendation is moving forward? And it's like, no, we're going to talk about that today. But I want to thank everyone for getting engaged in this process and telling us the information. And I want you to know that we have listened. And no matter what, today there's going to be some people that are going to think we should mask and some that think we shouldn't mask. And we're just trying to weigh all of the information that we have. We've also taken time, because of the input that we've been receiving from our community, but to talk to staff members. We've talked to our administrative team. We had a very long conversation the other day about what do we believe is best in each of the buildings. We've met with the incident command team, and we didn't put this in the presentation, but I think we had it a couple of weeks ago. But because we can't find somebody who is willing to be the COVID coordinator, bless Heidi's heart, she has said that she's willing to take on that responsibility again this year, and Angie's willing to help with it. And so we're willing to listen and to learn and to work with our public health authorities to make the best decisions that we can make. The one thing that I want to tell you that is the most fun for me as the superintendent of schools is the fact when I stood out in the hallway with you today, how even though we have different beliefs about maybe what should be the recommendation or what the board should be deciding for the coming school year, we have a lot more similarities than we do have differences. This is not a we versus they sort of decision. It's all about us, and it's about our kids. Because clearly I hear from people all the time, they want our students and our staff safe, and they want our students in school with their teachers every single day. They don't want any of that stuff from last year. And so when I come forward and I bring forward a recommendation today, it's really with trying to keep those two things in mind. How do we keep our kids in school every day with their teachers, with their peers? How do we keep the sports and activities going that we all love, all the warrior activities that we love to attend? And how do we do that and still be faced with some of the challenges that are happening with this pandemic that we wish would just go away? We're all on the same wavelength when it comes to that. And so today, as I've looked through the goals that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, we've been looking at district data. We're talking within our administrative team about following the mitigation protocols moving forward. And as I considered this new matrix that Heidi went through with you on how we're trying to come up with this information and looking at the current data that we're at right now at a 32.5 going into the school year, I believe that as your superintendent of schools, that the best thing that I can recommend to ensure the safety of our children and our staff and to keep our kids in school with their teachers is the following. My recommendation as superintendent of schools, first of all, is effective Monday, August 30th, 2021, that face coverings will be required for students in pre-K through grade 12, staff, volunteers, and visitors. There will, however, be exceptions. So during physical education classes and during Minnesota State High School League after-school activities, while the students are participating physically in those activities, that they do not have to wear masks. And what I talked to the command team about, it reminds me of the Olympics. When people were performing, they didn't wear the mask, but when they went back to the bench, they put the mask on. Also, there are exemptions for people who are identified as medically fragile or have behavioral needs, maybe with an IEP, that would prevent them from wearing a face mask. And we, as professionals in our school, are ready to address that. The athletics and the activities will follow the current district face covering mandates, and we've met with Jack Freeman, our athletic director for the school district, and he is prepared to enforce kind of what we talked about with the face coverings. And then the thing I'll come to in a little bit, but any activity outside, you do not need to wear a face covering. And if it's football, or if it's something outside where they're still having fresh air, it is not required. Number 3, all students, and this is a federal law, that all students, coaches, drivers, and staff will wear face coverings in school buses and in any kind of district transportation to and from school, to special events, study trips, also known as field trips, athletics, and activities, until January 18th or until we're told differently. The 4th recommendation that I'm bringing forward to the board today is that on September 30th, it's a Thursday, we will have an additional in-service day for staff to prepare for the potential online learning shifts that may have to occur during the school year. We do not have distance learning anymore because there's not a safe learning plan. We do not have hybrid learning anymore because there's not a safe learning plan. If we are forced, because of numbers in our county and in our school, to go to an online model, I believe that it's necessary to have our staff ready to be able to adjust. And so I'm asking the board for an additional staff development day, which I believe gives us plenty of time for people to prepare for it so that we can have our staff ready to go into an online model. And finally, our students in pre-K through grade 12, school staff and visitors will not be required to wear face coverings in out-of-door recess, physical education classes, athletic practices or contests, or during other instructional and recreational activities. And that is my recommendation to the Board of Education today.
Okay, thank you, Lane. Just a quick question or clarification. When would it begin? Your suggestion?
August 30th, so next Monday.
August 30th. All right, thank you. Okay. Thank you all for that. Appreciate your input and your educating us on those matters. Now we're going to move into the Board of Education discussion on back-to-school COVID-19 information update.
Just had one question for Lane or Heidi. Any idea why there's the federal mandate for wearing a face mask on buses until January? What's the significance of that versus?
The significance that they're finding regarding, and it's all public transportation. So when you think about airlines, when you're thinking about subways, when you're thinking about school buses, what they're finding is they're close quarters typically, right? They're harder to social distance in, and they're closed quarters. So they don't necessarily have that natural exchange of airflow. And a lot of times people tend to be in those situations for a longer period of time. So my understanding from the guidance we received is because of that closed quarter, not necessarily being able to social distance and extended periods of time.
Okay.
And that's just been, and there was a lot of discussion in the beginning of the summer when that federal mandate went in, and you started to see schools say, well, we're school buses, we're not public transportation, and both federally and state, they came back with clarification and say, and informed us that school buses are public transportation and they fall under that federal mandate.
Quick question, going back a few slides, to the effect of close contact definitions and how somebody wearing a properly, I don't know if I read it, well-fitting mask, I think was the definition that I saw.
Yeah, so the national guidance that came out that was also adopted by the state departments of health is there is a new exemption from what's considered a close contact. So close contact has to be within so many feet for a cumulative 15 minutes over 24 hours. We all got used to that definition. The exception that they're giving to K-12 schools this year is that if the students in that vicinity, if they were both wearing a well-fitting mask, they're not considered a close contact. That definition only applies to K-12 students. It does not apply to the staff that are working in those buildings. The difference for staff, or those who are eligible for vaccination, is if I'm a vaccinated individual and I'm exposed to somebody that's been that's positive, if I've had that vaccination, I no longer have to quarantine.
All right, so my question was actually, I get all that.
Yep.
My question was, who's the arbiter of deciding what is a well-fitting mask in a room full of 25 kids?
You know, we really rely on our staff, right? And so that's where you're looking at multiple points of data or multiple mitigation strategies that we can use. Where are they appropriately social distance? You know, am I sitting next to Angie and Angie always has her mask backwards behind her ears, so I know if I was next to Angie, more than likely it wasn't well fitting. So we're gonna rely on our staff. Staff got very good at, we have strict seating charts. The same thing's gonna be happening on buses, so we can try to do the best possible job we can with contact tracing. Very time intensive, but the fact that this exemption is in place makes me excited because I was calling many families last year to say, I'm sorry, the class is now quarantined, and it might have been Jana's birthday, and now the child's not getting a birthday. So this exemption, and it aligns with what we were seeing localized in data and across state data. When we had a positive case in a classroom, we'd quarantine a whole classroom, and we were not seeing another positive case come out of that classroom. They're aligning that, and that's why they made that exemption and guidance regarding face coverings.
Okay. Then to the matrix, like, so let's say we're sliding from one, like we're going from yellow to orange or something like that, based upon what numbers are doing. What is the process? Like, let's say we go forward with masking now. and we know that the threshold to remove the masks is whatever it is per 10,000, 20 per 10,000, or whatever that threshold is. What's the lag time from when we get that number to when we can effectively repeal the mask mandate based on the numbers? Is that something that has to continually come before this group? Or is that something that you guys can make a decision on in the moment because of where the numbers are based on us approving the plan?
That would be pretty much up to you how you wanted that to be handled. If you accept the matrix today and are comfortable with us following along, with the numbers as they are and changing the mask mandate as according to these numbers, that's fine. Or if you want us to come to the board, we can do that as well. One thing I do want to say, though, when it gets to the red, and as you know, we're at 32.5, if I remember correctly, so we're in the orange right now today. If we get into the red and it starts looking like it's going to get really high, because, okay, so if this was last year and we got to the red, they would recommend distance learning for all kids. Okay, and we said that we actually waited till we got to about 100 before we went to distance learning, because that's what we learned during that process. As we get higher, and if we feel that we need to go to an online learning model, I would like to come back to the board and have these conversations again, because we no longer have a safe learning plan which we can guide from the state. And it says that the authority is over to the superintendent and the Board of Education to make the decision. And so if we can and do a preparation, I'd like to come to the board. If it's like an emergency type thing, we'd like the authority to make the decision and report to you.
Okay, that gets to the heart of what I was asking, because I think from my own position, I mean, I think the board should be the ultimate deciding entity on when we put them on.
Right.
I don't think we should wait to come before the board to take them off, is kind of where I'm at.
Right.
In other words, that the administration should be empowered to, the minute that the numbers are there, we shouldn't have kids in masks 1 day longer than, 1 hour longer than
So we
they need
could
to be.
follow the matrix, and if it went down
Okay, I just wanted to get clarification.
If it went down to the green, then it's totally strongly recommended, but it's totally up to each individual.
And as far as Crow Wing County goes, those numbers are essentially updated daily?
So you can
Is it
look
a
at
rolling 14 days, or how does that work?
So you can look at the daily count, right? So people can go onto the Crow Wing County website, and the Crow Wing County data is showing that low to high transmission. What we asked, and we're working with public health to do, is to give us consistent data to look at, right? So we're not going all over the map. So we asked Michelle Morris to go back and say, this is the data that we were used to as school districts looking at, that case per 10,000 count over that 14-week period. So she's going to be doing that, but at any point in time, like, we can see how many positive cases are daily, what's happening. And that's why when we developed our response plan, we really tried to say, here's a guidance based on your direction as a board. Here's some guidance factors that we can look at. It's not a hold fast true, just like the numbers last year weren't hold fast and true. We could see county numbers going up and not have much happening in schools. That allowed us time. So that's why we also built that next layer of the matrix to really look at site level data, and then to also look at classroom data. Because we did have, if we remember right, last fall, it became very recognizable that there was an outbreak happening at the high school early in September. From 10:30 getting a phone call till 1 o'clock in the morning, we went from 2 kids to 15 kids. So something was happening. So that matrix is set up to really let us respond to classroom level information, building level information, and then to apply it across the district. So some of those immediates, just like with the case of whooping cough, that's a pretty highly contagious, that's kind of when you look at infectious diseases, their public health starts to intervene too, and we have that. Michelle Moritz and I have each other's cell numbers, as does the incident command team, to seek that guidance. So we can say, boy, we have 3 cases now in that classroom. Should we be concerned? Now it's looking at 4. And that's where we really look at our online learning model shifts too, where we anticipate that happening is more happening in some of those isolated outbreak type, rather than a fell swoop across the district. Really being able to respond to that individualized data. But what I would anticipate is if we'd start to see an uptick, let's say in an elementary classroom, that might be where we get guidance to say, wow, you really have to stop and mitigate that because the positivity rate is climbing rapidly in that classroom. That online switch may occur then just to allow that classroom to continue to have that instruction with the teacher. So we anticipate if it goes that direction, probably being more isolated. But again, we don't know. It's kind of like last year. You respond based on the data and things that you're seeing. We just tried to the best of our ability to give you guidelines or matrices to help guide us with those decisions.
Any other questions?
There's one thing that might help, too, to clarify that with what you said, Director Boyles. If we move that last bullet about using the matrix for making our informed decisions, if we move that into the plan, it would be a 6-point plan instead of a 5-point plan. And I would recommend that we do that if you're comfortable with us going through these numbers.
Is this graph based on anything other than what was provided last year?
It was looking at multiple points of data. So really looking at mitigation strategies that are overlaying, having discussions with public health and with regional response teams of when do you feel or when did you start to see?
If I could just interrupt, Heidi. Is this coming from health experts that this is when you should require masks?
This has been guidance provided based on the county data, yes. So with Crow Wing County Public Health, the Minnesota Department of Health, Department of Education.
And the CDC?
I have not spoken directly to the CDC about this matrix. However, when you're looking at the numbers, they align with state public health, which they're accepting their guidance from the CDC.
I would like to add, too, that at the last regular meeting, the board asked us to bring together some kind of a plan for how do we know when we move from one to the next. And again, we have no guidance this year because there's no guidance for us whatsoever. Every school district has to do this on their own. And so I was at a meeting last week with superintendents from like-sized school districts. And we had this conversation about what kind of a matrix are you, what are you using to help make those decisions? And this was actually how many of them were using and were recommending. And so we just asked if we could steal it and use it because it made a lot of sense to us. Today I was on a phone call or a video conference with Senator Rood and some of the superintendents from our region. And all of those superintendents they said, we don't have a matrix for making these decisions. And I said, we would love to share ours and you can modify it if it works for you and if you want to. But we're all in this for the very same reason. And that's to provide the highest quality education for all of the children in Minnesota. This is what we know. This is the best we have right now, given the fact that we were given no tools to do this. And it's much harder this year than it was last year. At least we had a guide. This year we have no guide, just kind of do it. And this is our best effort that we could bring to you today. And we think that it's really good and that it's going to make it so it can be fluid so we can get rid of them or
And again,
get tighter if we have to.
And it's a guideline, just
It's a guide.
the guideline that was established last year. If you're looking, as you look across different districts, if you go onto the state data, they have that colored bar across that goes all the way from low to high. And that's exactly what this has done. It's been trying to take our localized data and apply it to that with the assistance of Crow Wing County Public Health and their expertise.
My only question for Lane would be, why did the state give up that responsibility of making the decision? Why did they put it on school boards that live in the community with people and want to please both sides?
Well, I think one of the things, and I think we all feel this way, we like more local control so that we can do things, we like, just an example would be last year, we were given the numbers and such to follow. And yet, in some cases, that might have worked for some schools, but it wasn't perfect for all the schools. And so I think our legislators heard loud and clear, let us make local control, let the school districts decide on their own. And that's why they're giving us local control, which we really like. But what it means is there's no guide for us this year. Like I was telling Senator Ruud today, if we could have just found something in the middle, because that's why we have policies and things like that to use as a guide to do it. And this year we have no guide, so this is our best attempt to do the best work that we can. And so I felt like we were really heard again today. That that makes sense. So yeah, I feel really comfortable with where we're at.
Okay.
And Director Nystrom, Public Health is asking the same thing. So when we've had to work very intensely with our local public health, they've asked that same question because they're feeling the same way now in their public health role. If this is really, we're being left to try to work, again, collaboratively, which is great, but they've kind of been left to their own to have that independent guidance at a county level compared to with the state piece as well.
One, as a community member, I appreciate that local control. As a school board member, I wish somebody else was sitting here.
I kind of felt the same way today.
I imagine you did.
Yes, I did.
But it also needs to be said that, I don't think those that are watching understand all of the scrambling and running and phone calls back and forth that particularly you two, not just you two, Heidi and Angie and Lane too, but others. It needs to be said that tons and tons of hours went into this, not to mention the stress that goes along with what Bob talked about. So we appreciate everything that you're doing with, a lose-lose situation. So thank you for that.
And I'll echo that. And I just want to make a clarifying point because I hear what you're saying, Lane, that there wasn't guidance handed down, mandated down to us. But I want to be clear that what I'm hearing from you guys is you have sought guidance beyond yourselves. Correct. You have, you know what I mean? So yes, you guys did the work, kind of built the airplane, but it sounds to me like you've sought out guidance outside of this room and these hallways.
As Lane mentioned, Superintendent Larson mentioned collaborating with other districts, right? Because there's a lot, over 400 school districts in the state of Minnesota. What are you doing? How are you doing it? What data are you looking at? How are you putting your data together? Who are you seeking? That's all been happening tirelessly, I would say, more intensely to try to get some realm of here's a guide, here's a reference, here's a starting point. As things ebb and flow, we adjust it just like we did last year. I highly anticipate that happening again. But I'm very grateful to Michelle Moritz at Crow Wing County Public Health. I'm very grateful to the colleagues that Lane's been able to seek guidance from and support from to try to put something forward. And then being able to tailor it to Brainerd Public Schools. What do our buildings look like? Who's in our building? How many kids are in our building? What's the traffic flow in buildings? All those pieces and facets have gone into this plan.
Any other thoughts for this discussion? All right, let's move on to the next step, which is discuss whether or not we approve the COVID plan as guidance for the school year 2021 to 22 back to school, which includes, and that would be wearing masks or face coverings from August 30th to January 18th. Is that correct? How far was it?
It just starts on August 30th, and it'll be modified based on the matrix. Matrix. The only thing that I would like to add is I would like to have the matrix put in as number 4 in my recommendation to you, and then number 4 and 5 would be 5 and 6. So I would ask that as far as my recommendation to you as a board.
Number 4, okay. All right, do we have a motion?
So, wait a minute, I need a point of clarification real quick, like we just talked about. Under what's on the table, that in theory would be moved upon right now and then voted upon, we would implement your recommended plan, which would institute masks district-wide August 30th. As written and would be approved, does that give you the power that you need to pull the masks off if the number's right size in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever?
Let's just make sure that that clarification is in the motion that you make. So yes, that we have the authority to follow the matrix where we can be less obtrusive or more if needed. But if we get to a point where it's getting really serious regarding that we feel that the whole district has to go to online learning or something, I would like to come back to the board and have that discussion. But we're going to give regular updates to the board anyway, plus the other communications that we've talked about.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up one more time in case other board members had concerns with it.
Okay.
So Elaine, the board would be consulted?
Yep. Absolutely.
If any changes, or if any?
Yep.
Well, I mean, stated a different way, just to make sure I understand it. The administration and your team has the ability to take the masks off, but if you need to put them back on, you'll come to us. Am I not saying that correctly? Or is it just, no matter what the numbers are doing, you guys are empowered to do what you need to do based on the matrix and the information at hand?
What I gathered from what we were saying is that we could take the masks off or put them back on based on the matrix, but if we have to go into online learning
Okay.
because of numbers,
Okay.
that you would like us to come back to the board for approval to go into online
Yeah,
learning.
because I don't want to wait for a board meeting
Unless it's
for.
an emergency or something.
If we have
Yeah.
numbers moving around, we don't want to wait or schedule an emergency meeting. I get behind that.
Well, and even to take that one step further, I think by our next meeting, I'd like to see added on to the matrix what it looks like to go into online learning. What you think that, so we don't have to
The
pull an
fact is, we don't
emergency
know.
button.
And
I-
that,
sure.
otherwise, we would have put it on there for you
Sure.
today. We just don't know what it looks like.
Understood.
Yeah.
There's no guide.
If we were still under safe learning plan, what learning model would we be in right now?
Right now, we would be in hybrid for elementary, distance for secondary.
Okay.
I'll make the motion then to approve the COVID-19 plan for school year 21-22 back to school, which includes what you added.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Director Nystrom and a second by Director Sjogren to approve the COVID plan as stated. Do we have any discussion?
Yeah, Director Blacklands, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. First, I do want to thank Heidi and Angie. They're just caught between a rock and a hard place. Tough spot to be. And Lane, thank you for your guidance as well. Kind of a follow-up to Director Nystrom's question about the mandate of last year. I too am puzzled about why last year we had the state mandate, and this year we're being told that, well, they wanted to give the decision to the local districts, and to me it's very puzzling and concerning of that thought process. And so, my decision tonight, which I will not support this, is not because of a political reason. We've gotten a lot of emails, phone calls. It's not because of a loudest voice at all. It's not because of the threat that we're going to lose kids and we're going to lose dollars. That doesn't influence my decision at all. A lot of comments about do the research. For every piece of document that supports wearing a mask, there's an opposing one, it seems like. So it's really none of that. It just simply is because I am not a health expert. I don't know what's best for our kids or not. And because of that, I'll always just continue to put the trust in our parents and our community and our students and let them make that decision. And because of that, I can't support this. It's not that I don't support you, Lane, or Angie and Heidi for pulling this together. I just can't support what this mandate is doing.
I have a note here from Director Ruth Nelson, who would like to share her thoughts at this point. If I were able to be at the meeting tonight, I would vote to require masks when indoors at all buildings for all students, kindergarten or pre-K through grade 12, staff and visitors. After reviewing the data from our public health groups and recommendations coming from the experts at CDC, Mayo Clinic, and other health organizations, I believe that requiring masks in our schools is necessary and will help prevent the spread of the new, more contagious Delta variant. The Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, recommends masking in our schools and is very concerned about the about the possible outcomes of those schools that do not require masking. This decision is not one I was expecting to make earlier this summer, but we have seen weekly the increase in our community of this variant. We have also seen what has happened in the South with hospitals at capacity. We need to protect the vulnerable in our community, and most importantly, our staff and our students. I know my vote will be unpopular with many, but I could not, in good conscience, not do what needs to be done to keep our schools as healthy as possible.
And again, she won't be able to vote. She just wanted to give her message. It said vote in there, but she will not be able to vote.
Right, thank you for that.
Yes.
Any other discussion?
I would just tack on a little bit to what Director Hagman said. I'm going to share some of his concerns. And then looking through that sort of similar lens maybe, if I can be a little more analytical and a little less focused on the physical realities of the situation. If we could talk about it from a risk mitigation perspective, just from a legal standpoint. There's a lot we don't know on both sides of this. We don't know what the long-term implications are in developing bodies and developing brains of any variant of the coronavirus, let alone the newest ones that pop up. So from a liability perspective, if we don't take some sort of precaution and in 18 months something pops up and we took no mitigating actions, certainly that would raise our risk profile. Although we also don't know the impact of 6.5, 7 hours a day wearing a mask on developing brains and bodies. So that sword cuts both directions. So left to that choice, when I came down to it and sat and searched my own heart on what to do here, I looked to the most credible sources that I could find in volume, and knowing that not everybody knows everything at this point, that it's a developing situation, but the preponderance of reputable medical sources lead me, and I read over 220 studies, white papers, articles, and press releases from all over the country from every medical, and I can't imagine that they're all on the same, agenda. In the end, they support masking, so I do too, with a lot of trepidation. But I feel like it's the best route to go right now, with the idea that the minute we can get those things off the kids, we get them off the kids. Because we know it isn't good for them. It's just a question of the lesser of two evils, which is worse. So that's all I have to say on the subject.
All right, let's call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries 4-1. And it is approved. Next item, approval of updated substitute rates of pay beginning in school year 21 through 22 as presented. Angie.
Thank you. Let me get my presentation up here quickly. So for those that have been with the district for a while, typically we have not brought substitute rates to the board level. The reason we are doing that now is there's been some additional things that have impacted our ability to get subs. And so I'm kind of going through a presentation of my recommendation for how we handle those substitute rates to try and increase our pool to support our schools and our students. Right now, we do review these annually and kind of look at area districts in our region. What are they doing for their rates? What is Minnesota doing for their rates? Currently, they only report on teachers and paraprofessionals, which are our largest unit. And then we kind of determine at the executive team if we're in line with that or if we need to do a little bit of tweaking. We also look across our contracts. So if it's a paraprofessional substitute, how does this align with the salary matrix of our paraprofessionals, and have those discussions. The main areas of the shortage currently include, and this has been ongoing since I've been here, special education and transportation paraprofessionals, cooks, custodial, interpreters, and clerical. We have had a pretty significant dropout in substitutes over the last 18 months, which is not surprising. We had a lot of individuals who were just not interested in substituting in an environment where they weren't really sure their safety, and they weren't sure of the learning platforms, how that looked. We did hold a training last year for some teaching staff because we knew we needed to build that up. Our teaching substitutes are doing pretty good. We still do have quite a few that are still willing to work with us, but we're still seeing a kind of a continuous decline and really a tough time recruiting in the areas of shortage. Other situations that have occurred that I'm coming to you today, our union groups are currently in negotiations. We have not settled any of those contracts, so we don't really have a salary matrix to refer to when what is the starting rate for a sub. A lot of times it was aligning with the step one of the wages scale in the contracts. We don't have any current contracts. We have last year's, but since we're currently in negotiations, we're not really sure where that's going to land. And I really don't feel comfortable waiting because we need to get our pool up because we don't know what our year is going to look like at this point. If substitutes aren't available, the following impacts. We do in certain contracts have the need to provide additional compensation. So if a teacher is missing their prep because they have to sub, because there's no subs available, there's additional compensation for that. If a custodian works an additional shift to cover for somebody else, there's overtime expenses. There are these things that are currently occurring. So we do have that cost already. Sometimes, especially in the interpreter realm or nursing realm, we may have to contract out for services. You can't just go without those services to our students. As I'm sure many of you know, when you go to an outside source, the cost goes up tremendously. And then the availability is also difficult. And then, the main point being in human resources is I'm always looking out for the stress and workload of our existing employees. When there's not enough staff, it's hard. It's hard for our staff, it's hard for our kids because our staff are stressed, trying to meet the needs for everybody. So this is where we have been since I've been here. From what I understand, there was a slight increase in 2018-19 where we moved up some to just meet our regional areas. However, we've kind of stayed aligned since there. The para substitute custodial did go up with the 2019-21 contract settlement just to try to get those wages aligned again to the steps. So this is where we are at currently. Here is the data that I gathered from the substitute compensation report. So the average teacher sub in Minnesota, in our region, and then also the same information for the paraprofessionals in Minnesota as well as our region. I added the median in there as well because instead of just the average, that makes a difference, I think, in what we think about, because the median is really saying what's the most popular. So you're kind of weeding out that somebody's paying a lot versus kind of where is everybody else at. This is my recommendation. So it's a slight increase on the teacher sub just to get us more aligned with Region 5. It's going basically from 120 to 127.50. What we do currently is if a teacher subs more than 5 days consecutively, we do it to the daily rate of the BS0 on the salary schedule. Right now, it is $225.84. If we settle sometime within the school year, then that will automatically adjust to whatever that step and lane would be. Admin sub daily rate, we're not recommending any changes at this point. The main areas where I'm requesting an increase are custodial, para, clerical, and interpreter, and cooks. So just really to try and get that level of wage up. We know kind of with our current environment and unemployment, we're struggling, everybody's struggling to get workers, you know, and coming into a school district is appealing for some, but when you look at the wages that somebody might make at Costco or Walmart, compared to ours, it's not too tough of a decision unless you have a true passion for what we do, which is the folks that we want. But we also want to provide a rate that they can actually do substitute work, because we all need them. We did do the Budgetary Income Act, so I had Marcy run some numbers. So it's got kind of wonky because 2019, 20, you know, everybody knows March 15th, the world changed. So that impacted kind of our hours that our subs worked during that year. Last year was just kind of a totally different ballgame because we had a lot of long-term subs and just a totally different structure. So we thought the most reasonable place to kind of trend it to would be 18, 19, because that was kind of our last normal, for lack of a better word, year. So there is an impact. Marcy calculated out where it is. From my understanding, you know, with the increases, a lot of times we've used extensive needs for subs within the custodial realm and paraprofessionals. That's kind of driving that increase to the general fund. And then the food service fund would be relatively minimal at $3,000. So since it's an impact of the budget in an already budgeted strained year, that's why we felt like it was important to bring it to you to just see thoughts on it, so I can really reach out to our subs and start seeing who's still with us this year.
I just wanted to do a clarification. So the slide two back, the audience might be confused because most of those are hourly wages, but the first three is a daily rate. Yeah,
and that's just the way it's always been written, so I just used it that way. But I think $127.50 works out to $17 an hour.
I think you'd get a lot of teachers if you're paying $127.50 an hour. Yeah.
That would be nice. I might.
Okay.
But you're correct, yeah. I should have added that clarification. That would be a sweet gig. Any other questions for me?
I think it's great, and I appreciate you working strategically on this, and, you know, even what you're presenting in my mind is still, it's not enough, but
It's not, and I think we all know that, and, you know, since I've been here, my push is really to start getting our wages up and really balance that with kind of the benefits, and it's a tough job because it's, you know.
Thank you.
We have limits, but I really would appreciate that.
All right.
Okay.
Do we have a motion for approval?
I'll move to approve the updated rates of pay as presented by Angie.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve by Director Boyles and a second by Director Nystrom to approve the updated substitute rates of pay beginning in 2021 to 22 as presented. All those in, any discussion? Discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next up, we have approval of the post-secondary employment options, PSEO, contract with Central Lakes College for the 2021-22 school year. Archie.
So the agreement in the packet is an increase of about 3% going from 236 to 243. Ruth did inquire about the amount that is spent, but it is an option that we are required to offer. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. Otherwise, there is no other change other than the increase in the price.
All right, thank you.
Is this a typo where it says employment, post-secondary employment option? Or is it?
Should be enrollment.
Post-secondary enrollment.
Yep.
On later me, okay, I just want to make sure
It
we're
is.
talking about.
Good catch.
We're talking about PSEO, just the classic, okay, just want to make sure that's what we're talking
Post-secondary enrollment
about.
option, yep.
Good catch.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve post-secondary enrollment options, PSCO contract with Central Lakes College for school year 21 to 22. Any discussion? I will abstain from this vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we have approval of security officers service agreement with General Security Services Corporation. Marcy.
So in your packet is the agreement. There are some, not substantial, but changes want to note. It did have a 27% increase because just like everybody else, they are struggling to find people. So it's in order to retain and find those staff. And the cost actually would only be about an estimated 4% increase because we are going from 2 FTE or 2.5 FTE to 2. I know last year there was a question mark there of do we really need the 2.5 between the two buildings? Well, now we are down to the one building at the high school, so it is okay that we go down to 2. So looking for approval on this agreement to move forward with it.
And so just a comment. I'm assuming that you talked extensively with a security company, so you're comfortable with the increase?
Yes, yes. In fact, I've had conversations with Principal Rusk, in the future, maybe it's an employee of the district. But for right now, this is what we're moving forward with.
Okay.
And this does come out of our safe and secure funds as well, just so you know that. Separate set aside.
I'll make the motion to approve the security officers service agreement with GSS.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the security officer service agreement with General Security Services Corporation. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved.
Thank you.
Next up, we have approval for the second and final reading of MSBA policy number 412, expense reimbursement for the 3-year review as presented.
The only change from the previous meeting is what we discussed. I did change the maximum tip to 15% instead of 10. So that is the only change from the first reading.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Director Hagelin and seconded by Director Sjogren. All those in favor? Oh, discussion? No discussion? No discussion? Hearing no discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approves.
Thank you.
Approved. Thank you, Marcy. Okay, next up we have the report of Superintendent Larson's evaluation. And there's a few things I'd like to share in that regard. First up, the board met in closed session with Superintendent on Monday, August 9th, 2021, to discuss her performance evaluation. The job performance review included evaluation results from the board members and other district leadership as well. The board identified her performance to be excellent and recommended offering her another 3-year contract while she focuses her oversight on the following areas. Those areas include academic achievement and continuous improvement process, equitable education, facility oversight as we finish the construction process, and an efficient and updated organizational structure, and then finally, a marketing plan to increase enrollment. Something else I would like to read is Director Ruth Nelson also wanted to share a comment. And Ruth shared that after having worked alongside Superintendent Lane Larson for the past 5.5 years, I want to share how much I have appreciated her leadership of the district. Lane is a very strong leader who has great empathy and a rare combination. These last few years, with the addition of the building projects and the advent of COVID, have been especially daunting for Lane, our staff and our teachers. I want to thank Lane for giving it her all for her friendship. She has and will continue to be a great leader for Brainerd Schools. Thanks, Ruth. Hear, hear. I feel the same. Okay, and that concludes my report for Superintendent Lane Larson's evaluation.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Yeah, so I've served under 5 superintendents, or with 5 superintendents, and I would put you right at the top. And I say that with utter sincerity. They were all great. We've had a history of many great superintendents here, and that's why we have a great independent school district. But your combination of empathy for people, getting to know people, and then that leadership, that hard leadership that has to come, you exemplify that. And so thank you for being our superintendent.
Thank you.
I agree.
Well, it's an honor to serve, and it's an honor to serve on behalf of all of the people who are here, and most of all, our incredible children. My life passion is high-quality teaching and learning, and so it's a privilege to serve with all of the wonderful teachers, administrators, cooks, transportation, bus drivers, just everyone. This is an incredible school district. And I guess I have an opportunity to say that. And, you know, we've had some really hard decisions to make lately. Things that have not been fun. You said you wish you didn't have to vote today, and I wish I didn't have to make the recommendation. But you know what? We have an absolutely incredible school district. We attract the best of the best to work in this school district, and our kids could not be more better set than with the team of people, the administration in the buildings, the teachers that teach the kids, the paraprofessionals that work with those kids. We are blessed in Brainerd Public Schools to have such an incredible school district, and it just goes to show the wonderful support that our community gives us, the support that people have for the Warriors, and the pride that we have at Brainerd Public Schools. We are in tough times, but you know what, you guys? We're going to get through this together. And we're going to be better on the other end of this thing. So thank you for letting me be your superintendent, and I look forward to more time together. So thank you.
That means you can't quit. So
Eventually.
70?
What? Yeah, no.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Lane.
Yeah.
Now we move on to the informational portion of our meeting. Marcy Lord, welcome to come on up. The business services report.
Yeah, so the financial report is in your guys' packet. It's the first one of the fiscal year. There's nothing really new to note. You'll see some more changes coming ahead since we actually had some community ed programs, so in the upcoming months, it'll actually look a little bit different than last year. But for this month, there was nothing really to note. The next board meeting will be our first enrollment report for the year, so looking forward to that. And that's all I had, unless there was any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. All right, superintendent's report, Lane.
All right. I just want to concur with what Marcy said. Right now, our enrollment is looking very good, and so we're just excited to have our kids back, and it's going to be a great school year. Just a couple of things that I'd like to, I didn't put this on the recognition because this is a special school board meeting, but I decided that I wanted to acknowledge these people. As many of you probably heard on Friday, we had a water main break, or some kind of a water break at Harrison Elementary School. And I tell you, with the rapid diligence of our Building and Grounds Department, Harrison staff, ICS, and our contractors, we were able to stop it and prevent a real mess. And so I just want to thank everyone for being, once again, just prompt and willing to go the extra mile. And I want to publicly acknowledge these people who, on a Friday afternoon, stayed until the work had to get done to make sure that our schools are safe and ready to go for school. And so thank you, beginning with Reed TC, our Building and Grounds Director, Jeff Layton, Daryl Ramig, Dan Elwell, I gotta do this, Kib Weidel, Tucker Willard, Nathan Mickelson, Mark Doucette, Bonnie Michaels, Nick Renner, Tim Chida, Bill Hansen, Harrison staff, Jim Conrad, Jenny Smith, Judy Kringen, and Becky Meyer, Kyle Walter from ICS. Reed, I see you over here. I know you're really proud of this team and the work that they did on Friday to catch it quick and prevent it. And also to Service Master of Baxter with Ken and Jackie Redka and their team of professionals. Together we stopped what could have been a real mess at the beginning of a school year, and thanks to everyone for being dedicated to do that. Also, just a couple of things. As we know, starting next Monday, our staff come back. And we've got a lot of work to do to get some of these buildings ready to go since our staff haven't been in them all summer. We were just had the new teacher workshop the other day, and the majority of the teachers that were there said, I've never been in my building or in my classroom. And so we've got a lot of work to do, particularly at the buildings that had the extensive construction this summer. So we're really excited to get them in their buildings. We're also very excited about opening workshop and to do some great work for meeting the needs, individual needs of our children, and to ensure the safety and security of all of our kids. And we look forward to having all of our staff back Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Also, I do want people to know that we really are trying very hard to not have a super spreader in school. We want to keep school open like we talked about. And so our back to school workshop, as much as we wanted to have that Gitche Ziba just totally filled with about 1,200 employees on Thursday, we've decided that we're going to host it from the buildings in which all of our staff are in, because we want to make sure that we have everybody as healthy and ready to go so we can have just a fabulous school year. So probably the high school and maybe Lincoln will be over at the Gitche Ziba, so that we'll have some people there when we do our back to school kickoff. It's going to be a really fun theme. But the rest we're going to have in our buildings, and we're going to celebrate being back to school with our kids. So we have that this coming Thursday. Next Wednesday we have our welcome back to schools for our students and staff to come and meet their teachers. We're going to provide as much of the social distancing and things as we can. I know we have following this meeting, all of our principals are meeting to talk about, okay, how do we do this now that we have a direction going into the school year? How do we make sure that we've got everyone safe so we can be in person? And finally, the day we've been looking for, Tuesday, September 7th, we're going to have back to school. The board members are going to be welcoming the kids at all the elementary schools at 7:30 that morning. And we just really look forward to having school in session and having our children and our staff back together. So thank you everyone for supporting us, and we look forward to a great school year 21-22. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Lane.
Yep.
And gang, we do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. I'll second.
Okay, Director Nystrom moves to adjourn, seconded by Director Boyles. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved.
Perfect.
We are in adjournment.
Nice.